What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about the two most insidious forms of addiction to ever exist. And I'm going to simply put pornography and overeating. So why do I say this? Well, I say this because these two forms of enslavement are readily available to us at all times, basically throughout our day. We all have smartphones in the 21st century, so that means that we have access to the internet at all times. So if we have access to the internet of all times, well, 70% of the search traffic on Safari is pornography related. And everywhere we go, if we're at home, if we're at work, typically there's food available. So we have these things readily available to us at all times of the day, basically. And we are so consumed in them that I would argue that these two forms of addiction are worse than marijuana, alcohol. Okay, I'll stick to those two, because I think cocaine and heroin are probably the worst. I don't want to speak on that. But I would argue that they have the potential to be worse than alcohol and marijuana. And why do I say that? Well, first off, let's start off with pornography. When you ejaculate, right, you are losing so many nutrients. You are losing iron, zinc, vitamin B12, vitamin D. You are losing so many essential nutrients that are vital to certain processes in your body, that when frequently ejaculated and lost, result in fatigue, depression, anxiety, laziness, mental fog, brain fog, you name it. The list goes on. And so if we're constantly consumed in this habit, then it's no surprise and no wonder why we struggle with women, with motivation, with creativity, with standing up for ourselves, with getting stronger in the gym, right? Because if we don't have mastery over our sexual domain, then it's virtually impossible to master any other aspect of our lives, because one of the biggest forms of dopamine released in our brain comes from ejaculation. It's nature. Basically, when you ejaculate, nature's basically telling you, hey, you did a great job by procreating, by continuing the species. So it gives you a high reward, which is a huge surge, a big surge of dopamine. But the problem is that when that release becomes the only form of satisfaction that you get during your day, then working out doesn't become very satisfying. Reading a book doesn't become very satisfying. Talking to people in public doesn't become very satisfying. Making a video or doing some creative project like writing or public speaking doesn't become very satisfying. Because your first form of survival, which is sex, one of the first, is compromised, and you are abusing it, and your brain is so burnt out from the dopamine that you don't get satisfaction from anything, so you have no motivation. Therefore, you have no motivation to do anything. Your brain is basically, your body and your brain are basically communicating to you that we have procreated, we are all set. We do not have to go out and be like active. We don't have to be working. We don't have to do anything. We can just chill. We can relax. So pornography makes people very lazy. That's another thing. We have a lot of lazy fucking people in this world. Myself, I've been there before, and sometimes I struggle with it. But we are very lazy, and I would argue that pornography is a big factor in that. It basically, like I said, robs you of vital nutrients and screws your dopamine receptors to the point where you don't get satisfaction by doing anything other than getting off. So that's very detrimental to men. And I would argue that it's a big reason why we're weak. Why we're fucking, we can't stand up, why we can't say no, why we're pushovers, why we're tired all the time, why we're depressed, why we're angry at the world. Right? And the next, so moving on, let's talk about food. Well, digestion, I'll start off. 70% of the US population is overweight or obese. So that basically just tells you everything you need to know right there. We are over-consumers in terms of food. We overeat way too much. So digestion takes up virtually, it takes up the most energy. It's the one function in your body that takes up the most energy. One of the ones that takes up the most energy. So if that's the case, right, and you know, there's certain foods that are easier on the digestive system, like fruits and like certain meats and vegetables, but the vast majority of people aren't eating those foods. So not only are we over-consuming, we're over-consuming the wrong foods, right? So that means that it's harder to digest, meaning it takes more energy to do that. So if you have less energy available to you, you're gonna, like I said, you're gonna be lazy, you're gonna be tired, you're gonna be in a state of fog, you can't think correctly, you can't be creative, you can't do anything besides want to lay down and take a nap or watch TV or sit on your phone, right? Like, you're not going to have any incentive to do anything if you're an overconsumer of food. And food is very dangerous too, because it's available to us at all times. And a lot of people, they stay at home, so you know, people who don't have jobs or whatever, or maybe they're too young to have jobs, they're at home all the time. So if you're at home all the time, you're more tempted. Idle hands are the devil's workshops, are the devil's workshop. So if you're not busy doing shit all day and you have nothing to do and you get bored, especially if you live in a cold climate where you can't really be outside, what are you going to do? You're going to go to food, you're going to go to your phone for entertainment, for pleasure, for novelty, because you're bored. So food has the ability to really destroy us because, one, it takes up a lot of energy, right? And two, it's readily available. And three, it has the potential to be over-consumed. A lot of the processed food nowadays, especially like the desserts, like in commercial grocery stores, are the sugar that they put in those foods have the potential to be just as addictive as cocaine and crack. So we have a big problem here, as you can tell by what I've discussed. We have two forms of addiction, of enslavement, that are completely wiping us out, wiping out our spirit. We're supposed, like as men, we're supposed to be out there. We're supposed to be fucking motivated. We're supposed to be working on something, building shit. But instead, we have a bunch of men that are docile, that are passive, that are weak. And it's a result of addiction, in my opinion, right? It's no wonder why I look at it. We have all these men that just won't stand up to the tyranny that's being imposed on us. Why is that? Why is that? Do you ever ask that question? Why can't men just say no? And it's virtually because the reason why is because they don't care. And if, you know, when you don't care, it's because you're addicted to other things. Oh, as long as I wear a mask, as long as I can eat my food, as long as I can be on my phone, I'll be all right. You know? And this is the problem we have. I don't want to go on a tangent. This is kind of like a topic for another time, but we as men are very weak, and I would argue that these two things are the main reason. They are one of the two main reasons. They are the most readily available substances. I just said that 70% of the American population is obese, and 70% of the internet traffic on Safari and on Google is pornography related. So we are consumers of pornography and we are overeaters. And these two things, when they come together, create a mass destruction of masculinity and leave us weak, leave us wimps, leave us simps, leave us tired, leave us lazy, depressed, pissed off, angry, and we start behaving like women, we start getting mad, we start committing suicide, and the list goes on. So I think you guys get the point here. We got to start kind of getting this under control. I would say the first one to get control of is your sexual domain. Because if you don't have control of your sexual domain, that's a bigger the bigger chemical release in your brain, the more dopamine that's released in your brain is pornography and sex. It's not food. Food is up there, but you get more dopamine when you orgasm. So if you don't have control of that one, then everything else becomes harder, because that's the hardest one to overcome, in my opinion. Yes, that is the hardest one to overcome, because it gives you the most chemical release. So the one that gives you the most chemical release is probably going to be the most addictive, which hence is going to be the most difficult to overcome. So when we get control of that, everything else we want to get control of, like whatever, your food addiction, like probably in this video is a good example, will be much easier. And when you get control of your sexual domain, it's easier to go to the gym. It's easier to be motivated, to go out, to get a job, to work, to talk to people. It's a lot easier. It really is. So that's number one. And then on top of that, I would argue that it's good to implement, while you're doing this, by the way, intermittent fasting, right? Because when I wouldn't say go all out on the fasting, because it has the ability. If you go overboard with fasting too early, it can actually be worse because you are not used to it. So if you go too extreme, then the opposite is the result, which means you can go back to over-consuming. So I would say that a good way to get control of this is start practicing semen retention and start implementing fasting. Fasting will help with both. You won't have too many urges. I would say like early on in the process you will have urges, but fasting makes it a little less, like, I would say the urges aren't as strong when you're in like a fasted state. So definitely implement that into your recovery, because this is something we all need to recover from. This is the healing that needs to happen. We are more addicted than ever before, and if we don't get control of this, especially as men, but even women, but men in particular, right? If we don't get control of this shit, it's going to consume us, and it's going to keep creating the problems we have. I could go on and on and on about the problems that these two things cause, but I'll save that for another time. I think you guys get the point. Definitely start implementing some fasting. Start exercising. Start getting out. Get a fucking job, right? If you're home all the time, then how the hell are you going to overcome this, right? It's really hard to do that. Get a fucking job, right? So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell to get notified when I upload. If you have any questions, comments, or anything, feel free to leave them down below, and I will do my best to get back to you. And as always, I hope you guys have a good one. Peace.